So today we are talking about the existence of God. I'm going to slide you over here. Look at that. I made you, Zoom people, a border so that you can see words and see Zoom people. So today we're talking about the existence of God. So I'd like to start off by asking you, if you've ever wrestled with this question, does God exist? What kind of things made it hard for you to believe that God existed?
You don't see him, feel him, or touch him, or like, he's not proven by our eyes, I guess.
So you don't see him, feel him, or touch him. So he's not proven by our eyes. Okay? You look,
hard not to believe in a way.
okay? It's been hard not to believe him.
Yeah.
Okay?
When you feel the wind, you don't know where it's coming from,
Right?
but you know it's there. So you believe that there's something that made the wind blow, I guess. Yeah.
So even though you don't see the wind and you know where it's coming from, you still know it's there.
Yeah.
Okay?
I
Well-
think there are like a lot of counter gods. So it's like, how do I know that this God is the only God?
Okay.
A lot of different religions.
So there's lots of counter gods. Is this the real God? There's so many religions. How can I know that this is the one God? What other kind of questions have you come across in your own struggles with how do I know that God exists? Does he exist? Okay, well, we're not alone in asking these kind of questions. Okay? But as we get into this, there's a perspective I want us to have as we start thinking about the existence of God. Soren Kierkegaard said, to stand on one leg and prove God's existence is a very different thing from going down on one's knees and thanking him. And then in the same line, Thomas à Kempis said, what good does it do if you dispute loftily about the Trinity, but you lack humility and therefore displease the Trinity? So even as we start talking about this existence of God, we should ask ourselves, why do I want to know? Why do I want to know if God exists? What will I do if I know it? Do I want to know because I want to disprove him? Because I want to fight against him? Okay, that's one place to start. Do I want to know because I want to step into that relationship with him? Those are two very different places to start from. How will it make any difference in my life? And I would argue that when I first come to God, I don't know that it's going to make any difference in my life. I just don't know that. It's almost like I have to start going, and then I see a little difference in my life. And then I walk a little further, and I see a little difference in my life. So we might not have all these answers before we start asking the questions, okay? We're invited to delight in the Trinity, to know God more and more as we grow in relationship with him. That's why we're trying to figure out, does God exist? Because we come from a tradition. Other people have told us, people who have walked with God before, saying, there's an invitation. You can delight in knowing this God. That's why you study this God. That's why you get to know him. Because knowing him more and more, we grow in relationship with him, and we get to delight in him more and more. So that's a good motivator for me, because I do a lot of studying, and I don't need to study more things for no reason. But to be in this relationship, delighting, I like the word delight. So we're looking to delight in him, to worship him, and to relate rightly to him. That's why we're going to study. Are you with me so far? Okay. I'm sure there's other reasons to study him too, but these are the reasons where we're coming at it from. Now, in talking about, does God exist? A lot of people historically start with this question: why is there something rather than nothing? It's kind of a basic question. Why is there a tree rather than no tree? Why is there a person rather than no person? Why is there something? And historically, there have been different ways to think about this. And of all the billions of people in our world, most people when they think about this, fall into one of three groups. So we've got some people who say, well, something has always existed. There is no God. It's just always been there. And this is where atheism would fit into this camp. It's just always been there. I've heard other atheists give arguments that, well, it came from an alien life force, they brought it here, or it, but the very beginning of something was always there to begin. More than an eighth of our world affirms this through Buddhism. Okay, so, they try to empty themselves completely. There's not really a God, but something's always been there. Okay, well, another group of people think that everything that exists is God, and God is everything. So, so it's not to even ask the question of did something get created or not. The question doesn't make sense to these people because everything is God and God is everything. If you saw the movie with John Travolta, I was going to say Paranormal, but anyways, that's not the name of the movie. But what's that? It's not the one with Michael. But anyways, in the movie, he talks about these aspen trees, about how they are largest organism because their root system connects to each other and everything is connected to each other deeply. So we're all like a piece of water, a molecule of water in a huge ocean. We're all connected to each other because we are all God and God is all us. Well, the name for thinking like that is called pantheism. Pan meaning everything. Everything is God, God is everything. And in this group is the people that believe in Hinduism or Taoism or Confucianism. They believe that there is this communal existence that we tap into or tap out of. And then the third group, in this group is also Spiritism, which is making a comeback. And Greek philosopher like Plato, or closer to our age, a guy named Hegel, he's thinking this, that everything is God, God is everything. But then a third way to think about why is there something rather than nothing is that there is an infinite and personal God that created everything from nothing. Okay? And that is monotheism. Mono meaning one, theism is a belief in God, so that there's one God. So in this camp are Jews and Christians and Muslims. So we do have something in common with Jews and Muslims because all three groups of people believe that a personal God, personal in the Muslim world being a relative definition, God created everything from nothing. So we got these three camps of people. So if you've ever doubted, you're not the only person in the world who's ever doubted. Okay? But these are the three common ways historically that people have believed. So back in about 1250, okay, if you think of like King Arthur time and stuff like that, right? Knights of the Round Table, no Monty Python jokes here. If you think of that time period, we get some really smart biblical scholars like, oh my gosh, I just blanked on his name, Thomas Aquinas, thank you. So Thomas Aquinas came up with what he called proofs of God's existence. So before we talk about these proofs, there's some things we should know about the proofs. They don't really prove God's existence, okay? We call them proofs, but they don't really prove God's existence. Okay? What they do is that they demonstrate the reasonability of faith, especially in our culture today, okay? My two brothers are not saved, and so they think that I am following a delusion because I believe in God. And they love me and they're very kind to me. And they say they're very happy for me that I found something that makes me happy, but they're happy that I'm deluded, okay? And so these proofs are a way for someone like that, who's a kind person, but just doesn't believe God exists. It's to show them it's reasonable for me to believe. Faith is not blind faith, it's faith in evidence. I'm a Christian because of the evidence of the resurrection testified to by witnesses who were there, okay? So I have my faith in something, And so these proofs are going to demonstrate it's reasonable to believe in God. Another thing about these proofs, they point to a need for further investigation. Okay, this is not the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of the conversation. Just like we said, we are looking at the existence of God so we can delight in him. Well, that's the beginning of the conversation. So any one of these proofs, what we're trying to do when we explain to somebody the proofs, it's that if you start thinking, oh, okay, maybe so, then that's the beginning of your investigation. Now you can start to say, okay, if there is a God, what about him? These proofs have also shown to be the means by which the Spirit draws people to faith. There are several people who they were not trying to be antagonistic. They didn't want to push back against God. They just really didn't know. And so with these proofs, it helps them say, oh, okay, this is possible. And the Holy Spirit can use that to help their mind consider the possibility. And then they can start walking towards that possibility. We'll talk more about the Spirit later. The other thing about these proofs that Thomas Aquinas said is that they serve as reasonable grounds for condemnation. In Romans chapter 1, in your reading, you noticed that Grudem pointed out that God said that everybody knew there was a God and they chose to not believe in him. And so that kind of became a self-fulfilling prophecy that they even forgot they made that choice. And then in Romans 1, it also says that because all these things are evident, because God has made them evident, people are without excuse. So these things that say, here's good reasons why you can believe that God existed, even if they don't believe, the fact that these are there means that they don't have an excuse, which is kind of a harsh thing to my soul. It makes me feel bad, but I think that's reasonable, okay? Now, Grudem points out 4 arguments, and there's more than 4, but we're going to focus on 4 and just highlight a little extra bonus one, okay? You get a bonus for today. So the cosmological argument. It's trying to answer the question, what explains the existence of the universe? Why is the universe here? What explains its existence? And the argument is that every effect has a cause. There can't be infinite regress. Like when you look in a mirror and you got a mirror behind you and you see forever there's a mirror, they're saying that, you can do that with 2 mirrors, but in reality, something is always the cause of something, okay? So if that's true, that every effect has a cause and every effect depends on a cause for it to exist, then the universe and nature cannot originate itself. Therefore, there must be a first cause. Something must have happened first that's outside of this causing thing. And that must be God. It must be something that's bigger than our world, our universe, because our whole universe operates on every cause has an effect, every effect has a cause. So the only thing that could be a first cause is something that's from outside of our universe. Okay, something that's bigger than our universe. Now there's a little tweak on this. In the mid-1200s, about the same time as Thomas Aquinas, there's this group of Jewish philosophers that followed Kalam, and they came up with something I think is a little bit easier. It's a little twist on it, a little bit easier for me to understand. Whatever begins to exist has a cause of its existence. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. Okay? If it began to exist, we all talk about the Big Bang Theory, that scientists are saying the universe is continuing to expand. So it had a beginning. So anything that has a beginning had to have a cause. That's what the argument is. So then somebody can say, well, then God has a cause. That seems like a good argument. So to say, why isn't that the end of the story? Well, because we are finite, and everything that is finite, everything that has a beginning and an end, has a beginning and an end. And we're saying that God is infinite. He doesn't have a beginning. He doesn't have an end. And that's why it has to be God to be the first cause, something that didn't have a beginning or an end. Okay. So they're saying that the person who said then God has a cause is confusing God with finite beings. Are you with me so far? This stuff is kind of heady. You might not get them all, but maybe you'll get one that kind of rings true that says, oh yeah, I get that. And maybe the Holy Spirit will help you help somebody else who's really struggling with that particular reason they don't believe in God. Okay. So another pushback against the cosmological argument, okay, that God created the universe because it had to have a cause. Stephen Hawking says that the universe created itself. Okay? He proposes self-creation. And then the answer to that, a guy named Swinburne said, yeah, but having a creator as the first cause is a more plausible and simpler explanation than having something self-create, because we've never seen anything else self-create. Even a tree that has to come from a seed, an acorn. Nothing just self-creates in our entire world. So it's easier for us to believe that there was a first cause. That makes sense to me, okay? Now, the second cause is a big word, the teleological argument. And teleos can mean end, okay? So the end of something, the purpose for which something was created. This is answering the question, what explains the universe's amazing design? So if you've ever heard of people saying, oh, intelligent design, that fits into this argument, okay? The fact that the end product is so complex, so the teleos, the end of it's so complex, it had to have a designer. Now, back in the 1200s, 1300s, it came up with the idea that every watch has a watchmaker. If you found a watch sitting on the table, you'd say, oh, somebody made that. It didn't just make itself. And since every watch has a watchmaker, the universe must have a universe maker. That's the argument. Okay? So since this traditional argument, science has developed. So just in the past 100 years or so, 150 years, we've almost 200 years now, we've discovered this law of entropy. And for any of you engineers or chemists or science, right? The law of entropy, here's the big words, I put it on the screen. But in English, okay, what it means is that things fall apart. And if you're in my house, you know this to be true, okay? Things fall apart. Things do not build themselves up. Things decay, things fall apart. If I open up a bottle of perfume, the perfume will evaporate and diffuse into the air. If I put red Kool-Aid mix into water, it will turn the water red. I never start with red Kool-Aid and expect that the water will get clearer and clearer over time with just some red powder in the middle. It doesn't go that way, okay? So just the idea that things tend to spread out. This is why they say the Big Bang Theory is legit, because things tend to spread out, okay? So if that's the argument, then how can things come together in a complicated way? So if you look at the New World Trade Center, could that have built itself? Well, that doesn't make sense to us. Nothing else in our universe builds itself up. Things break down. They don't come together and build up. So this is the teleological argument, or intelligent design. So somebody has said, well, is this the best God can do? Meaning if there really was a God, he would have built better than this. I know, right? But, this happens to be a quote from Bertrand Russell, who is a noted atheist and mathematician, okay? And he asks he punches it right down the middle. You know what his problem is, okay? So I liked his quotes because I didn't have to go get a degree in college just to understand what he was saying, okay? Is this the best God can do? And the answer to that is, the Christian answer is, the best is yet to come. Don't base your answers on just what you see here. What we're seeing is just one scene of a movie. When did you ever pick one scene out of a movie and judge the whole movie on that one scene? One scene makes no sense. You have to see the whole movie to understand what the person who made the movie is trying to say. So that would be the argument. The best is yet to come. There's another argument against this. There's too many mistakes for there to be a creator. And I've heard this before from well-meaning people. You know, this is not a jerk, right? He's saying there's too many mistakes out there for there to be a creator, certainly not a loving creator. Okay? But the answer to that, according to whom? You're calling something you see a mistake. Does the creator call that a mistake? He's the one who created it. Is it fulfilling the purpose he made it for? In other words, only the creator can call what he makes a mistake. Somebody else has no idea what his purpose is for something. So they don't know if it's fulfilling his purpose for it or not. So I just think that's a question that we really can't ask. Okay. Not mistakes, but like I said before, only seeing one scene in a movie. That's the Christian view, is that what we see are not mistakes, but we're only seeing one little part of a whole story. And when we see the whole story, it will be obvious. And we know it'll be obvious because we see it over and over in Scripture, even in what we've been reading in Ephesians, how it says that Paul was saying how this mystery wasn't before revealed, but now it is, so that in the age to come, God will be able to show something to all the powers. Okay, so the demons, the angels, the people, everything, he's going to be able to show something to all of us that we can't see right now. So we see that it's coming. So I would say they're not mistakes. We just don't see his purpose for everything we see yet. Now that leads, if I go back just a second, is this the best that God can do? Okay, and his idea is if there really were a God, there wouldn't be mistakes. It would be better than this. That kind of helps me understand a little bit this next one, this ontological argument, okay? Ontology is the study of being, okay? What it means to be. So what does it mean that God is, okay? So what explains, that this argument is trying to help us with what explains our highest ideal. Just like that critique said, well, God would do better. Okay, just for him to say God would do better means he has something in his mind. This person has something in his mind that there's a better. And we all do have some kind of an idea of what ideal is. All humans have a concept of ideal. All humans have a concept of a perfect being. Now, what my concept of a perfect being might not be what your concept of a perfect being is, but around the world, we all have this idea that there's this perfect being. And so this argument says, therefore, a perfect being must exist. Because we consider it to be that way, it must be so. Now, this argument leaves me scratching my head. But this was a very valid argument for people who are really deep into this stuff. And so the argument against it, Immanuel Kant said, well, perfection does not necessitate existence. Okay, so my house, I have an idea of what perfect is, but that doesn't mean it ever exists. As a perfectionist, I strive for perfection all the time, but that doesn't mean it's real. It doesn't mean I can ever achieve it. So if I can never achieve it, then this argument would not be a good argument to say that God exists, because we can imagine a perfect being. The pushback from that comes from certain people, very smart people. If you ever heard of Descartes, he's a theologian and a mathematician. Hegel, more in our time period, Alvin Plantinga. I can't understand their argument here, but I would refer you to read some of their works if this is an argument that interests you. Okay? But it's swimming too deep in the pool for me. I can't do that. So if I can't understand it, I wouldn't be able to lead someone to Christ through it. So I let that one go. Okay. And then finally, we get to this moral argument. And the idea is that why do we have a sense of right and wrong? Okay. Especially today in our world, we have lots of people who have a very strong sense of right and wrong. We've got people who are so angry and frustrated at the injustice against racism that they're willing to spend their time, their energy, their resources in these protests And we've got people who say that that's wrong. So they're willing to spend all of their thumb muscles on Twitter and on Facebook trying to push back against it. Okay, so we've got lots of people who think they know what right and wrong is. Where did that sense come from? Okay. Humans have a sense of justice. Therefore, they were created by a God who has a sense of justice. And he shared that character trait with us. That if you, as a neuroscientist, if you open up my brain and you look at something and you say that my consciousness is in my brain, nobody can tell me where my consciousness is. Nobody can tell me where my sense of right and wrong. Nobody can explain that to me with neurotransmitters and chemicals. That there's something there that I can't explain. This morality, this idea of justice. Somebody had said that a moral imperative, the idea that there is something that's just, points to an ethical absolute. So these are just fancier ways to say the same thing. Now, Immanuel Kant, who is a philosopher, had said that there must be a God because we have sense of right and wrong. And against it, good old Bertrand Russell said, well, Kant just listened to his mom. That's where he got his sense of right and wrong. He listened to his mom. Okay, that's a view. But to push back against that, we've discovered that morality exists in all societies. Now, at first, we weren't quite sure about this. There were some initial anthropologists who went and studied these tribes. And back in the 1960s and 70s, they were saying that, oh, this tribe, this people, they don't have any morality. Therefore, morality is completely put on people by their parents, by their society, that there's no morality that just comes with being human. But since then, other anthropologists have gone back and rechecked her work, and it was pretty shoddy work. And the current, whether they're atheists or believers, current anthropologists affirm that all societies have a sense of morality. Another argument is that morality is a religious glorification of weakness. Evolutionary might makes right. This is from Nietzsche, if you've heard of him. Evolutionary might makes right. Well, against that, I would say, but we have some atheists who are moral. So if you're saying that morality just comes from religious stuff, then how come people who aren't religious have a sense of right and wrong? They shouldn't. Then there's another argument that says, well, this is from Freud. Well, morality is just a negotiation between your id, your primal urges, and your superego, the imposed constraints of society. That you have these urges that you really want, and that society is putting something on you to say you have to behave nicely. Okay, but that doesn't explain the people who are protesting injustice against the imposed constraints of society. Okay, anybody who stands up and says, no, that's not right, against their society, that they're not getting that from their society. So I see that as a rebuttal against it. So all these things are part of this moral argument. So far, just to review a little bit, we talked about the moral argument, and before that, the ontological argument, which I didn't understand, but it says since we can think of a perfect God, there must be one. And we talked about, somebody help me out here. What else did we talk about? Teleological, intelligent design. The fact that this world is designed so well, it must have had a designer. And then what was the first one we talked about? Cosmological argument, right? The idea that everything has a cause. Something that begins has to have a cause to begin. Since the universe began, it had a cause to begin, and that cause had to be a first cause, and it had to be something that's not finite, but something beyond us. Now, this last one is the bonus I'm talking about, right? This is Pascal's wager. Blaise Pascal had came up with this idea to ask the question, if heaven and hell are real, do you dare choose disbelief? Okay. Now, to be clear, I've never seen anybody saved with this argument, but it is a conversation starter. Okay. And his logic says that given a chance of belief in a Christian God with a consequent life of obedience, or no God with pleasure in your life and possible hell, a Christian God is the reasonable choice, because this whole world is temporary and an eternal hell certainly outweighs temporary pleasure. Now, against this thought, though, is a Christian God is telling us to give our life away, to live for God, not for yourself. And people who don't believe in God get to keep their life and live for themselves. And when you frame it that way, well, it does seem easier to just keep your life and live for yourself, doesn't it? Than to actually give your life away like Jesus asks us to. So the rebuttal against it says, well, it's better to give what you can't keep anyways, to gain what you can't lose. Okay, and that's from bonus points to the person who can name the missionary who said that. I think it was Jim Elliot. Is that who you think it is?
The Gates of Splendor.
The Gates of Splendor by Jim Elliot.
That's Elizabeth Elliot.
Writing of her husband. Yeah, he did, and she wrote. But the idea is that no matter how you live this life, you're going to die, you're going to lose it, you can't keep it. So if you can't keep it anyways, you might as well give away what you can't keep to gain what you can't lose. Okay, so this is a modern twist, a Jim Elliot twist on Pascal's wager. But again, like I said, even though, I've never seen anybody come to Christ with this, the next argument in this is that really legitimate if they start believing in God because of that? And I would say anything that gets them to start believing in God is legitimate. In Luke 15, when the prodigal father is begging his older son to just come into the party. Your brother's, he was dead, now he's alive. Come on, just come into the party. He didn't say, come into the party because you have to believe that, be all supportive of your brother in order to enter the door. He didn't say that. If the brother would have said, okay, I'll come because it smells good, the father would have been happy. If he would have said, okay, I'll come because I'm gonna eat and drink the stuff, but I'm not gonna talk to him, the father would have been happy. It would have been a beginning. So don't think that a beginning has to be perfect. A beginning is just a beginning for ourselves and for other people. It's just a beginning. God can work with that. So now we get to the part of why don't people believe in God? Now, besides all these arguments that it's reasonable for us to believe in God, I have found very few people that tell me that that's why they don't believe in God. So have you guys ever interacted with somebody, or you yourself, who didn't believe in God? What was their problem? Why did they say they don't believe in God? Evil? What's that? Evil?
I was gonna say, why do bad things happen?
Why do bad things happen?
They've had Christians just misrepresent him, and that's turned them completely away from the Lord.
Okay, they've had Christians misrepresent them, and so now they're turned completely away from the Lord. They don't like the packaging.
Countercultural. Some unknown thing coming in charge of their decision.
Cool. It's countercultural. And I'm repeating everything for Zoom people, but also in case somebody else doesn't hear it. It's countercultural for us to put our trust into somebody that's invisible and that's bigger than us, and to yield to an authority. I think it's countercultural, even if you could see it. It's kind of countercultural to believe in authority, in absolute authority. I think that scares people. Other thoughts? Why don't people believe in God?
I have one.
Experiences, I feel like from growing up, there's like this. Every person has a different interpretation of God, and so I think that can cause doubt when you see these people over here, these people over here, these people over here, and they all kind of view him a little differently. It kind of makes you be like, wait a second, like how does that add up to this God, or what's being said here. So I think for me, that does something that I think I kind of, it caused a little doubts growing up for me, because I was like, well, this isn't consistent, I don't like this.
So if I'm hearing you right, Caleb, to boil it down, you're saying that that lots of different people have a different explanation for who God is. And you're thinking, how come there's so many different, it's confusing to see there's so many different explanations of who God is. And it's hard for me to trust one of them over another one. Okay. And then I think I heard you, Sophia. What do you think?
Because they don't need it and they are fulfilled without it, or because they don't want to lose anything.
Okay, I heard because they don't need it and they're fulfilled without it. And then what was the second part?
And because they don't want to lose anything because of rules.
Because they don't want to lose anything because of rules. Wow, these are the real reasons, right? So let's see if we can answer some of those, okay? You mentioned evil, the problem of evil. And the idea is that if God really is all powerful and he's good, then why does evil exist? Because it seems like if God could stop evil and he was good, that he would stop evil. And to that, I'd say, church, be encouraged. We're only seeing one scene in the movie. You know, you can't take it out of context. Yes, God is all powerful. The church says God is all powerful, God is all good. And that the Bible gives us some explanation as to why evil exists, but whether or not you understand it, the best is yet to come. He does conquer evil completely, conquers death, conquers Satan. He says there's a future with no more evil. But right now we're in the in-between time of getting there. Okay? And if you want to keep asking that question, well, how come we're still getting there? Why not you're there not right now? Well, I would not understand his answer to me from that. You know, for whatever reason, he's chosen to present himself in time as like a movie, like I was saying. He didn't choose to present it as a moment, but as a movie. So I have to be patient and not take one scene out of context. But that problem of evil, people continue, believers and non-believers, continue to struggle with that all the time. And so as believers, we just keep encouraging one another that evil will be conquered completely and permanently in the future. And then there's this other idea of the internal incoherence of God. Remember I talked about that Bertrand Russell who came out with the snarky questions? Well, he says that it's illogical to think of a God who could be all-powerful, all-knowing, and everlasting. For example, can God create a rock that it's too heavy for him to lift? Okay. So my answer to that would be, God is the God who made logic. He made reasoning, he made order. And that is actually not just an expression of who he is, but it's a comfort to us. I am comforted by the fact that I know the sun's going to come up tomorrow. I'm comforted by his faithfulness in how ordered things are. That makes me feel secure, that I can count on something. So I should not use that logic to be a jail to keep God in. Even though he's given me logic and reason, he extends beyond my logic and reason. I saw this show once, The Good Place. Has anybody ever seen The Good Place? That cracked me up, okay? Ted Danson and stuff. And I'm not going to do any spoilers, okay? But I will say that there's one part where the lead says, we found the 3 clues you gave us. That's how we ended up knowing to meet you here. And this higher being, Ted Danson, says, actually, I gave you 9,000 clues, but I'm glad you found 3. So in the same kind of way, you know, I can only see the clues that my mind is able to comprehend, but there is more to God than what I can comprehend. And then another reason why people don't believe in God is atheism is logically neutral. So if you don't know, you should just not believe. Okay? Well, that certainly is a position, and I you know, my brothers believe this. That's what they think, right? But that reveals something about their presuppositions, their foundational beliefs. That's my 5-minute timer. So their presuppositions are that there is a neutral without God, and that I have an option to believe in God or not. And that's because logic is the basis of reality, and God fits into that logic or he doesn't. Okay. And like I just said, in contrast to Bertrand Russell, Christians come at it from there is a God. And sometimes I understand him and sometimes I don't. So that logic is not foundational, but God is foundational, and logic fits within that. Okay. So you might not agree with one or the other, but to say atheism is logically neutral is to choose this framework of reality and to deny this framework of reality. But that's not to balance the two frameworks. Okay. So if you're trying to be fair and say, okay, which one's better? That means you're trying to look for a scale that can balance these two things. You're not looking at only one side of the scale to say, well, if I start with this, he doesn't fit in here. That's not taking this one into account. Do you see what I'm saying? So logically, I think that falls apart. Anthony Flew is a well-known defender of atheism for 40 plus years, from the mid 60s up until 2004, when he, oops, I must have deleted that slide, sorry. In 2004, he came to believe in God. And it was because of the developing arguments for intelligent design. As he was able to see more and more of how complex the cell was and DNA and things like this, he thought, okay, it would take more faith for me to not believe in intelligent design than to believe it. So if someone is going to think that, well, atheism is the logically neutral choice, I would encourage them to read some of Anthony Flew's later works, because he can relate to you. He knows how an atheist thinks, and now he thinks differently. So he might be able to talk with you on your own level there. Now we've got some other important questions too. And these are the ones I want us to talk about. How does an unbeliever come to faith? I will preface this conversation, I will quote this conversation saying, God has to enable us to believe. We can't see what we can't see. If I'm saying that here's where we are and God's here, I can't see that unless he shows it to me. So fundamentally, I have to be shown. But I have to be shown something, right? It's not just like a lightning bolt and all of a sudden I get it. Now I'm woke, you know? I have to be shown something. I have to be told that there was a Christ who rose from the dead. I have to be given some kind of detail of what to believe in. And that detail is the word of God. And this is where Romans is telling us believing the gospel comes by faith, comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So God has a responsibility to send his spirit to call people, but we have a responsibility to share the actual details of the good news, so that when we're doing our part to share the details and God's doing his part to share the spirit, people can be saved. But if we're not doing our part, you know, and God's doing all his part, it's really hard for people to believe in a Jesus they've never heard of. Somebody has to tell them, right? So, and I'm sorry, I'm right at the end of our time here. This, in terms of the knowability of God, I do want to say this, I already said it, we can only know what God reveals to us. And we can never fully know God. So I can know what he reveals to me, but I can't know what he didn't reveal to me yet. But even though I can't know everything about God, I can know God truly. I know Ross. I don't know everything about Ross. But the things I do know about Ross are true things. You know, he's a man. He lives in Denton, Texas. Those are both true statements. He's a preacher. Those are true statements. So what I do know about him, I can say they are absolutely true, even though I don't know everything about him. And we're invited to delight in a God where we get to know him more and more in a true knowledge, not just about him, but of him, where we don't just know about God, but we get to know God. Okay. So I'm sorry that kind of took long.
Oh, great.
What kind of comments you guys got? Ross, you sound like you got a comment or something? Okay. Opening up the floor.
I've got so many things.
Okay, Sophia, she's got so many things.
But I'll just say one for now. The argument that sold me on Christianity was, why would we believe in something that we could fully understand? If we could fully understand it, God wouldn't be all powerful or worth believing in, because he would fit into our logical boxes and we wouldn't need to serve or give anything up for him.
Were you guys able to hear that? Why would we ever believe in a God that we could completely understand? Because we need to believe in somebody who's bigger than us, or else whatever we understood about him, we could just do ourselves. Is that pretty much summing it up, Sophia?
Yeah.
That was the argument she said that got her the most.
I was also going to say that when we were discussing reasons why people don't believe in God, never any of the reasons I've ever heard ever negate that existence. So it's always just like a choice of why they don't believe it. It's never like, oh well, I have to solve proof. You know.
Well, and that's a good point. She's bringing up that people, it's not so much that they're saying God doesn't exist. I have a proof that he doesn't exist. I have found the same thing, that it's not so much that they don't believe God exists, it's that they don't believe my God exists. They don't believe that I can know him the way I know him. Or they have questions about how could this Christian God be really the God? And those kind of answers are why we are taking this kind of a class, you know, and we're taking a break next week. We won't be meeting next week, but starting the week after that, we're doing another 6-week block. You're all welcome to sign up and jump in on that. And we're going to be digging into who is this God, because that's where you answer those kind of questions. I think, and I try not to be too hard on people, even though it's very illogical to say, well, I don't like him, therefore he doesn't exist. You know, that's how our heart works. Our heart works by, if it doesn't answer my need, I don't want it. And so our job is to allow God to answer our needs. And when he does that, we see him as more and more beautiful. And then we're able to share that with somebody else in a very gentle way. So that's what we're trying to do here. Okay. All right. You have
Still with the survey, there's going to be a survey coming out. Please take 30 minutes to really help us kind of get some feedback. This is our first time, so.
sweet.
Did you say 30 minutes?
So there's a survey that is online that either has come in your email or will be coming.
We don't have to answer all of them, but just answer as thoroughly as you can.
And the survey is to help us. This was our first at bat here, and we want to adapt to what people's needs are. Tell us what worked, what didn't, what you'd like to see more of. So please take the time to answer that survey. Please take the time to sign up and to encourage other people to sign up. It will be its own topics for 6 weeks. It will not, you don't have to have had this 6 weeks in order to understand those 6 weeks. They stand by themselves. So anybody can jump in at this point. It's an on-ramp. Other questions? Dave, is anybody, what's that?
That's awesome. Thank you guys for doing that.
Dave, is anybody saying anything online that you need to share? Is anybody? Okay, let's see if I can see it. I'd love to discuss more about all these classes. Sweet. Okay, they're encouraging one another. All right. Well, thank you, and I'll see y'all in church at 10:30.